13 centuries earlier, as a brutal conflict raged across a desolate plain, valiant fighters found themselves overwhelmed by a never-ending horde of tiny creatures. A sense of hopelessness washed over one of the warriors as he realized that the monsters continued to emerge endlessly, with no sign of stopping. A woman with dark hair observed the calamity demon as it started to lay its eggs, while nearby, a warrior with red hair expressed disappointment, realizing they had once again failed to arrive soon enough. The red-haired warrior accepted the circumstances with a sense of resignation, believing that what was happening could not be avoided. As had happened before, he understood that the only way to imprison the demon again would require the loss of many lives. Just then, an unexpected voice broke the silence, firmly declaring that there was no need for such a sacrifice. A colossal surge of blue light burst forth. With a single, overwhelming attack, every monster was completely wiped out. A man with striking black hair and an air of self-assurance suddenly emerged, expressing surprise as he questioned the warriors' difficulty in handling such insignificant foes. The woman spotted him right away and spoke his name, Liam, aloud. His companions stared at him in utter confusion, trying to grasp what kind of powerful assault he had just experienced. Someone in the group observed that while Liam had always shown remarkable talent, the feat he had just accomplished, wiping out every demon spawn with one powerful attack, went far beyond anything they had seen from him before. When a warrior hesitantly challenged him, Liam stood tall and declared with pride that he had claimed the 108th ability for himself. He departed, and his companions were left utterly stunned. Even after unleashing a strong attack, he watched as more monsters kept crawling out from the opening in the earth. Liam couldn't believe how the monsters kept emerging in overwhelming waves. He released a fresh surge of energy. Liam's release of overwhelming power left his fellow fighters stunned and speechless. After acquiring 108 unique abilities, Liam believed himself to be the supreme ruler, convinced there was nothing he could not achieve. He instructed the rest of the group to take cover behind him, boldly declaring his intention to face the calamity demon by himself. Liam walked up to an enormous hole in the ground. From within that place, the gigantic calamity demon began to appear, depositing countless eggs as it emerged. Liam explained that he refused to permit the creation of so many dangerous, man-eating creatures. The figure unleashed a fierce attack resembling a golden rope, determined to drag the demon out of hiding. The object was then pulled up and out of the hole. The calamity demon's true form emerged, displaying itself as a gigantic, grotesque beast that radiated horror and revulsion. The monster unleashed a powerful stream of purple energy, hurling it forward as an attack. Liam quickly reacted, raising his defenses to intercept the strike directed his way. Both attacks struck simultaneously, triggering a powerful explosion that shook the surroundings. Liam confronted the ancient demon, which emerged once every 3 centuries, and declared that its defeat was imminent. From the earliest days of civilization, people have battled relentlessly against these terrible beasts and the horrors they unleash. The individuals dedicated to destroying the calamity demon became known as the 100-man unit. Every 3 centuries, as the calamity demon returns, the fighters in this unit are reborn to face the threat once again. They would inevitably lock it away, sacrificing their own lives in the process. Liam insisted that merely sealing the demon was outdated, boldly proclaiming his intention to destroy the creature on his own. He planned to risk it all on this one strike, knowing he could use the combined force of his 108 abilities just a single time. At the most critical moment, an unexpected betrayal struck him from behind. Liam collapsed onto the earth, his arms and legs brutally cut away from his body. The assailant moved closer to him and seized a handful of his hair. Liam stared in shock as he recognized his assailant, his red-haired companion. Confusion and disbelief filled Liam's voice as he demanded an explanation for his actions. Confessed to his treachery, making it clear that he would not let anyone destroy the calamity demon. Instead, he intended to claim all 108 powers for his own gain. In order to guarantee that Liam could never come back to life in another form, declared that he would place a curse of immortality upon him. Without warning, he launched a vicious assault on Liam, forcefully draining every bit of Liam's power for himself. They ridiculed the supreme ruler, labeling him as weak and insignificant. Following those events, and his deceitful allies declared their intention to trap Liam in the abyss alongside the demon. They forced him into the same pit where the creature had come out. Liam glanced back one last time at his former allies. Their sly grins revealed their satisfaction at having turned against him. A magical seal was employed to shut the entrance. Gazed at the seal, clearly pleased with the result. Liam's allies vanished one by one, giving up their lives to trap both Liam and the monster in the same prison. Deep within the abyss, Liam came to understand that his companions had never truly sought peace. Instead, they had betrayed everyone, using them as sacrifices to imprison him alongside the demon. He started to question the reason behind it, eventually concluding that the demon's occasional returns must somehow serve their interests. Liam accepted that he had no choice but to remain alongside the demonic creature for the foreseeable future. The Calamity Demon moved closer to Liam, lifting its claw and stopping just inches from his face. Liam looked at the Calamity Demon with clear disdain, questioning whether it believed itself to be noble and important. With a tone full of contempt, the speaker remarked that beings with such little intelligence had no business acting that way. The speaker went on to claim that the cruelty had reached a level so extreme, it was offensive even to something as harmless as pancakes. Within, the Calamity Demon and its offspring relentlessly subjected him to every imaginable torment. Liam had been doomed to live forever, just as the betrayer had proclaimed. No matter if his insides were ripped apart or if his body was consumed. His wounds would heal in a flash, trapping him in a cycle of unending agony. For more than 1,200 years, this torment has persisted, with the events unfolding without end. Liam made a solemn vow that his desire for revenge would remain unshaken, even if countless millennia went by. He resolved to resist the traitor, defy destiny, and endure the suffering without yielding. He promised himself that he would return one day, determined to force the demons to bow before him. In a deep moment of hopelessness, when the unrelenting agony became too much to bear, Liam found himself pleading for his life to end. At that instant, a strange voice echoed through the air, reaching out to Lord Liam and beckoning his spirit to inhabit a new body. His spirit was lifted out of the darkness and drawn toward a radiant glow. After waking up, he realized he now inhabited a different body. He was revolted by the grime that filled the area around him. He felt so feeble that standing was impossible for him. He overheard people discussing him, using the name when they mentioned his body. The group jeered at him, with one person questioning whether he might be dead. Another quickly dismissed the idea, insisting that they would never risk becoming a killer over someone like. Upon discovering that he was still breathing, they chose to discipline him for causing them unnecessary concern. She forced him underwater in the pond once more. As slowly regained consciousness, he realized he was encircled by unfamiliar faces, and barely able to speak, he whispered in awe, wondering to himself who these mysterious individuals could possibly be. Suddenly, a rush of memories overwhelmed him, as vivid images of the bullies, harassing him, replayed in his mind. They seized him by the hair and forced his head down beneath the surface of the water with brutal force. At that moment, someone new, Joshua, stepped in and pointed out that the others were showing too much mercy. He pulled out a tiny vial and announced his intention to demonstrate the proper technique. She clarified that anyone under the influence of this drug would end up dancing in a bizarre and unforgettable way. Despite repeated warnings about the drug's addictive nature, the others ignored his desperate requests for them to stop. Joshua instructed the group to restrain, struggled against their grip, pleading desperately for mercy as he tried to make them halt. The drug was administered to him through an injection in his arm. Without warning, his body was seized by violent, uncontrollable tremors. Struggled to keep his sickness under control, but the overwhelming nausea him, and he ended up throwing up uncontrollably. The bullies burst into laughter as they watched his unusual way of moving. Joshua commanded him to move as if he were a marionette controlled by invisible threads. Following a brief episode of violent shaking, his body crumpled onto the floor. The group of bullies erupted with exaggerated laughter, ridiculing with their scornful amusement. His ordeal continued when Joshua loomed above him, demanding to know who had given permission to rest, before delivering a harsh kick. He recalled the moment when Joshua towered above him as he lay on the ground, mockingly commanding him to rise and continue dancing, even if it meant pushing himself to the brink of death. The story shifted back to the present, was sprawled on the ground when a revolting memory surfaced in his mind, making him aware of the harsh truth about where he was. One of the bigger bullies grew furious upon hearing mumble, and demanded in a mocking tone to know what had just uttered. A self-assured grin appeared on his face while he remained sprawled on the floor, catching the attention of the bully. Agitated by his expression, the bully seized shirt, yelled inches from his face, and insisted on knowing what made him smile. With unexpected force, seized the bully's wrist in one quick movement. In that instant, he became aware that, even though the reason behind everything was still unclear to him, one thing was undeniable. The people standing before him were nothing more than worthless trash. His voice carried a hint of rebellion. An vengeful spark flashed in his eyes as he insisted that those who had done wrong deserved to face consequences, silently challenging the others to disagree. His remark infuriated the bigger bully, prompting him to seize by the collar and yell, astonished that had the nerve to insult them so boldly. Ignored the warning completely, concentrating instead on detecting the hidden magical energy coursing through his newly acquired body. The realization dawned with a sense of letdown, that the ability turned out to be nothing more than a feeble control over ice. At the same moment, the bully launched a fierce punch in his direction, determined to make him understand what real suffering felt like. Just as the punch was about to land, swiftly surrounded his own arm with a layer of ice, stopping it in midair. An icy blade swiftly took shape along his forearm, intercepting the attack. The bully's eyes widened in disbelief as he struggled to process the reality of his unexpected change. Flashed a sly grin, making it clear that escape was no longer an option for his opponent. He raised his arm, now encased in a thick layer of ice, and brought it down with tremendous force, striking the bully with a powerful hit. He was sent sprawling onto the floor. He let out a cry of agony, towered above his vanquished adversary, expressing disdain as he watched the bully writhe on the floor, overwhelmed by the sharp agony coursing through him. The remaining bullies stood frozen, their faces pale with fear and disbelief as they witnessed what was happening. This unexpected surge in strength left everyone puzzled. At that instant, understood that the person who had inhabited this body before him had never truly mastered its powers. Even though he had won, exhaustion weighed heavily on him, and his limbs trembled from using every ounce of his strength against his rival. Witnessing the outcome, the remaining bullies were gripped by terror and scattered in every direction to escape. Reached out his hand, releasing a surge of icy energy. The pursuers finally reached the fugitives, bringing their escape to a sudden halt. He walked toward them with a calm demeanor, signaling that it was time to address the situation, while his mind started working through possible ways to handle the group. He positioned himself before one of the men, and demanded that he remove his clothing and give it to him. He made it clear, with a look of revulsion, that the swamp had left its foul odor clinging to his clothes. He glanced at the next bully, and announced that he planned to use the bully's jacket as a hand towel. Once he had changed into fresh clothes and collected what he needed, he looked over at the frightened bullies. Deciding they had learned their lesson, he told them to stop. With that, he turned his back and strode off, while the bullies remained frozen in embarrassment and disbelief. Once walked away, leaving the bullies stunned and speechless, he watched them quiver in terror, silently considering whether he should drag every last one of them into the swamp. Fear was clearly written across their expressions. One among them dropped to their knees, expressing deep regret and admitting fault, while earnestly asking for his pardon and promising they would not repeat their mistakes. His tone, icy and detached, questioned the subject of their conversation and pointedly brought up the fact that they had ended many lives. He criticized them, pointing out that believing an apology by itself could earn their forgiveness showed an extreme level of selfishness. The supplicant, driven by desperation to prove his innocence, dropped to his knees and shifted all responsibility onto Joshua. He insisted that none of it was his doing, explaining that he had only acted under Joshua's instructions. They understood that defying his orders was not an option. Recalled the name Joshua, and in his thoughts, labeled the boy as a troublesome brat. The bully went on with his confession, revealing that it had been Joshua's idea to target by using the story about Liam Game's descendant. Grew more interested when he heard the game's name, and insisted that the bully explain what it meant. Wearing a furious expression and speaking with authority, he demanded that respond to the question he had just posed, causing the frightened bully to quickly comply. The bully started to clarify, revealing that Descendant of Liam was a traditional game handed down through generations of students at the Royal Academy of Magic. Whoever is selected as the descendant of the traitor Liam Hale faces punishment from all the Academy's students, each finding their own way to make that person suffer. When heard the name Liam Hale, he stopped moving, his body suddenly still. The bully's eyes widened in shock at how he responded, and he remarked that the tale of the traitor Liam Hale's downfall was so well known that even young children had heard it. He had once been the era's most notorious villain, ultimately brought down by a band of 99 heroes. Liam came to understand that the people he referred to as the false victors had entirely rewritten the past to suit their own version of events. With a sly smile spreading across his face, Liam resolved that he had to set the record straight. Following the confrontation, Liam compelled the bullies to lead him to where he lived. His residence appeared abandoned and crumbling, causing the bullies to quietly question among themselves why he insisted they come to such a rundown place. Facing them, Liam informed the group that they were free to leave now. He cautioned the group that their journey was far from over. As Liam arrived at the entrance of the house, a man dressed in a formal suit stepped outside, curious about whether His Highness had arrived back yet. Liam understood, based on how the man spoke to him, that the body he now possessed was once that of a royal family member. He realized that, while memories of being bullied stood out sharply, all other details remained inaccessible, as though the mind itself refused to reveal them. He faced the man and inquired straightforwardly about where came from. The man explained that held the title of the kingdom's 8th prince. Liam wondered aloud about the reason he didn't reside in the castle with the other royals, and the man explained that unique situations made it impossible. Liam questioned inwardly how anyone could have the audacity to subject a prince to such degrading treatment. Liam chose to ignore the issue of the bullies for the time being, realizing that Spotty showed obvious signs of not getting enough nutrition. Just as he was about to step inside, the head butler called for him to stop. Hurrying over, the butler studied him with worry, noting how much he had changed and wondering aloud what could have caused such a transformation. Liam's initial reaction was one of doubt, as he questioned why someone of such low rank would challenge the authority of royalty, and considered if this was an insult directed at. He quickly understood, just by looking into the man's eyes, that the worry he saw was completely sincere. Liam made up his mind to be straightforward. In his thoughts, he affirmed that he had no plans to behave the way the original once did. With complete sincerity, he informed the astonished head butler that the he once knew no longer existed, leaving the man utterly stunned and unable to believe what he had just heard. From that moment forward, he commanded the other man to think of himself as someone else's servant. Later that night, Liam rested peacefully in his lavish bedroom. He experienced a dream that transported him over 2 millennia into the past. Within the dream, he found himself alongside his friends, locked in battle against terrifying creatures. Among them, a girl addressed as if he were her big brother. Distinguished by his red hair, questioned whether they were ready for such a challenge, convinced victory was beyond their reach. Despite his uncertainty, his fellow fighter encouraged him, insisting he shouldn't speak so pessimistically. Without warning, a massive monster lunged at and drove its weapon into him with brutal force. Watched in horror as he was hurled skyward, her voice echoing his name in fear. The creature shifted its attention to and seized her firmly. Injured and in pain, shouted angrily at her. She pleaded with the monster, urging it to cease its actions and spare her from harm. At that pivotal instant, an enormous surge of energy burst forth, obliterating the monsters. Liam made his entrance, proclaiming that he had shown up at exactly the right moment. Liam glanced at who was wounded, and remarked that was hanging on to life by a thread. Stared in disbelief, his eyes wide as he looked at Liam, silently wondering if Liam was there to rescue them. He was embarrassed by his decision to act independently, especially after insisting he wouldn't depend on Liam. Liam set aside his pride, mentally labeling his earlier words as immature. He then started to cast a healing spell, gently reassuring the other person that everything was all right now. He inquired about how was doing. He also mentioned, too, that he was heading out to gather some strengthening supplies for their use. Was filled with gratitude as he acknowledged to himself that, despite the times Liam had frustrated him, Liam had been the one to rescue both him and. Grasping Liam's hand firmly, he silently promised himself that this act of kindness would never be forgotten. Liam opened his eyes as he emerged from his dream, a newfound sense of purpose settling over him as he understood his next steps. He pushed himself upright in bed, resolve burning in his eyes as he vowed to track down the ungrateful thieves and reclaim the power they had taken from him. He decided that, above all, he needed to show his thanks to the one who had provided him with this body to inhabit. The following morning, the head butler approached and informed him that his breakfast awaited. As Liam took his seat at the table, he noticed the meal was identical to the plain fare he had eaten the day before. He sampled the food, grimacing at the unpleasant flavor, and silently complained about how awful it tasted. Clarified that the head butler had taken charge of making the meals himself, admitting that he lacked experience in the kitchen. He explained that he had no one else in the palace to assist him. Liam gazed at the plain meal before him, inwardly mocking the fact that this was how he spent his second chance at life. The head butler started expressing regret about the unsatisfactory meal, yet Liam cut him off before he could finish. She explained to him that there was no need for an apology if he had done nothing wrong. Despite the circumstances, Liam emphasized that resolving the food shortage needed to become an immediate priority. The following morning, while Liam made his way toward the academy, he overheard fellow students chatting excitedly about learning the history of magic. He silently questioned how he might uncover the whereabouts of his foes in this unfamiliar setting. He was still finishing his thought when a crowd of students, with Joshua at the front, stepped in to block his way. Joshua greeted him with a sarcastic smile, teasing him about whether he had at last chosen to show up at school. Liam quickly understood that the boy in front of him was Joshua, the very same person who had been tormenting. Joshua mentioned that he had learned about delivering a harsh beating to his friends the day before. He flashed a mischievous grin, making it clear through his expression that he believed he had crossed the line. He faced the other students and stirred them up, insisting that someone from Liam's lineage had no right to oppose them, and declaring that they could not let this situation go unchallenged. The students responded with excitement, loudly expressing that his defiance was disrespectful and deserved punishment, vowing to put him in his place by teaching him a lesson. Joshua instructed his group to leap at him, just as they usually did. The students targeted Liam, choosing to hurl stones at him rather than resorting to physical blows. The group jeered at him while he remained rooted to the spot, uncertainty flickering in his eyes as he questioned whether his fear might cause him to lose control. At that instant, while Liam stood quietly, crimson trickled down from his scalp. A sudden understanding struck him. This agony was the very suffering had been experiencing the entire time. Without warning, the students halted their stone throwing, fear gripping them as Liam fixed them with a piercing stare. Joshua raised his voice in anger, demanding to know who had given them the command to halt. They trembled with terror, completely paralyzed and unable to react. Upon realizing that his supporters had not succeeded, Joshua resolved to handle the situation himself and announced to Liam his intention to physically confront him. He insulted him by referring to him as worthless. She charged at him aggressively, her voice raised as she demanded that he understand his boundaries. Upon impact, Liam's delicate hand broke apart without resistance, reminding him of the vulnerability of his transformed body. Liam quickly restored his injured hand and assured everyone that everything was fine. The crowd stared in disbelief, amazed at how effortlessly he managed to recover from his wounds. Joshua lifted his hand, conjuring a ball of fire while expressing his irritation by referring to Liam as an annoying nuisance. Without warning, he unleashed a powerful burst of fire, his intentions clear as he demanded his opponent's defeat. With steady composure, Liam lifted his hand, summoning a barrier of ice that effortlessly stopped the incoming blaze. As Joshua launched his fire attack, it struck the ice shield, causing the flames to rebound and surge back in his direction. The force hurled Joshua and his friends high above the ground. All of them collapsed to the floor, knocked out cold, as the remaining students stared at the unfolding scene in utter disbelief. Liam remained composed, as he observed that everything had gone smoothly without any opposition. Just then, a heavyset teacher showed up and questioned Asher about his actions, blaming him for stirring up problems. The teacher, wearing a smug expression, remarked that apparently required additional instruction. Liam objected, insisting that the others had initiated the conflict. The teacher paid no attention to his protest, and instead instructed him to remain silent and come along right away. While the teacher escorted Liam out of the room, hushed conversations broke out among the remaining students. Some murmured that had finally gotten what he deserved, while others joked with biting sarcasm about how long it might take for him to bounce back, even suggesting they place bets on his recovery time. Without warning, a piercing pain shot through Liam's head. In an instant, he recalled witnessing the True being dragged off and tormented by that very teacher. Liam came to understand that the ache he felt belonged to the original, tied to a memory of this teacher, one of the very people who had caused him harm before. The teacher cut into his train of thought, criticizing him for moving too slowly and insisting that those who lagged behind deserved strict discipline. Liam fixed him with a chilly stare, privately mulling over the idea of discipline and silently deciding to accept the challenge. A chilling grin spread across his lips as he silently promised himself that he would be the one to fix this corrupt mess, determined to force the teacher to change through sheer will. The teacher led Liam into his office, making sure to secure the door behind them with a decisive click. He recalled that he had thoroughly guided him only 3 days earlier. Despite everything, he found himself stirring up mischief once more. He launched into a barrage of insults, accusing the other of pretending to be royalty and claiming he was someone who took pleasure in receiving harsh treatment. The teacher persisted with his ridicule, remarking that an unpleasant scent, one he associated with failure, seemed to come from the student. It was only natural for someone born from the lineage of a disgraced kingdom, and a woman once scorned by society to face such expectations. He finished his statement, declaring that was the most fitting person to inherit Liam's legacy, all while getting ready to cast a binding spell on him. Purple bands of energy materialized, tightly binding Liam's wrists and ankles. Without warning, he forced his opponent against the wall, holding him there with an unyielding grip. He halted abruptly, puzzled by the unusual silence, and questioned why Liam remained quiet instead of bursting into tears and shouts like he always did. He ridiculed him, claiming that his only talents were complaining and pleading to be excused. A sense of unease crept over the teacher, who noticed that something unusual was unfolding. He observed that Liam remained completely steady, showing no signs of shaking, and questioned inwardly whether Liam's sanity was on the verge of collapsing. The teacher, feeling uninterested, picked up a spiked club and showed his disappointment, believing that no game could ease his stress as well as did. A cruel grin spread across his face as he lifted the club, impatiently waiting for the other to move faster so he could finally hear the desperate cries he craved. Liam rose to his feet and conjured an enormous creature made of ice, which intercepted the spiked club just before it could strike him. The teacher stood frozen in shock, his mind racing as he tried to figure out who the person before him could possibly be. Liam broke free from the mystical bindings that had held him captive. He also observed numerous whip marks on his body while was changing his clothes. He fixed his gaze on the teacher and confidently claimed responsibility for the marks. The teacher called out desperately for assistance, raising their voice as they pleaded with to cease his actions. Liam commanded the creature to hold the teacher down against the floor. As the teacher began to address the class, Liam abruptly cut him off, threatening to break the teacher's arm if he continued without being given permission. In a split second, the teacher's arm snapped, causing him to release a sharp, agonized scream. Liam, his voice icy and unyielding, reminded the man of his command to remain silent and threatened that his next punishment would involve his left hand. This caused the teacher to freeze, gripped by fear. Liam observed that the teacher had caused significant pain. Within a memory from that surfaced in Liam's thoughts, the teacher attempted to justify his actions, insisting that everything he had done was meant as a lesson. The teacher quickly pressed his hand over his mouth as soon as he realized he had spoken, recalling too late the warning Liam had given him. Liam offered a sarcastic smile, suggesting that perhaps whipping truly did offer some sort of lesson. The teacher needed to demonstrate the lesson to him. He instructed the man to strike himself using a belt lined with spikes. The teacher firmly declined, making it clear that there was no situation in which he would agree to such a request. Liam's voice grew menacing as he demanded to know whether his companion would rather endure the sting of an icy arrow than suffer the pain of the whip. As a magic circle began to form, she concentrated on summoning its power. With a chilling grin, he warned that choosing the arrow might cost him his life. The teacher, unnerved by this threat, quickly reconsidered and consented to receiving the whipping instead. Liam instructed the boy to get moving quickly, reminding him that he needed to remove his clothes before beginning. Liam remained still, occupying a chair in silence. As the teacher knelt in front of him, wearing nothing but his underwear, tears streamed down his face while he clutched the spiked belt tightly in his hands. The teacher started lashing his own back, each strike causing him to cry out in agony. After some time, he came to a halt, worn out and bleeding, and looked to Liam to see if he had done enough. Liam responded in a steady, untroubled manner, instructing to repeat the action exactly the same way 100 additional times. The teacher stared at him, overwhelmed by a sense of pure fear. Once the final lash had been dealt, the teacher fell to the ground, his back marked with deep, bleeding cuts. He quietly announced that he had completed his task. Liam questioned him about his sense of relief, making it clear that he had no plans to release him at that moment. Fear spread across the teacher's face as he looked at Liam, whose expression remained icy and unforgiving. The teacher trembled, overwhelmed by a wave of fear and agony. Outside, the students looked around, puzzled and uncertain about the unusual events unfolding inside. Without warning, Liam summoned his magical powers to form a massive pillar of ice right in the middle of the school courtyard, then set the unclothed teacher high atop its peak. He started shouting desperately, hoping someone would come to his aid. Liam demanded that he admit his actions toward in front of the whole school. The teacher pleaded desperately, hoping they would be the first one rescued. Liam paid no attention to the other person and simply snapped his fingers. At the top of the pillar, the ice slowly started to thaw, making the teacher lose their footing and slip downward. Liam glanced upward from his spot beneath and pressed for a quick confession, warning that any delay might cause him to lose his footing and tumble down. Crushed by intense fear, the teacher raised his voice and confessed, revealing that he had physically punished. Liam insisted on getting more details. The teacher admitted to removing his clothes and striking him multiple times with a belt. He admitted to referring to this torment as a form of educational guidance. In truth, he only used it as an outlet to ease his own stress. The students sat in shock, their eyes wide, as the teacher shouted a confession of his own guilt. He admitted that was innocent, yet revealed he had repeatedly and unfairly disciplined him for no reason. He suddenly shouted out, admitting that he was a twisted person who took pleasure in using a whip. He finished admitting the truth, tears streaming down his face as he pleaded desperately to be forgiven. Rumors quietly circulated among the students that Pierce, their teacher, was ruined by the recent scandal and would no longer be able to remain at the academy. Liam shifted his attention to the students who were whispering and questioned whether they thought the situation was amusing. They stopped moving, rooted to the spot as if time itself had paused. He gazed at them with obvious disdain, questioning whether they were related to Liam, and made it clear that their presence repulsed him. Liam gestured first toward the group, then shifted his hand to indicate the embarrassed teacher stranded atop the frozen pillar. The speaker announced that anyone who had wronged Asher would meet this same destiny. He delivered a forceful warning, declaring that anyone guilty of the same wrongdoings as the condemned man would face punishment, and that not a single one would be spared. His eyes glowed with a blue radiance as he commanded them to shudder in fear and prepare for whatever destiny awaited them. Every student in the room, Joshua among them, watched in utter fear, not daring to make a sound. From afar, Joshua observed the situation, his bruised face twisted in frustration as he silently blamed. A girl whose long brown hair framed her face walked up to him, and with a look of disdain, labeled him as pathetic. In another part of the academy, within a grand and elegant office, an elderly man, clearly the academy's headmaster, remarked that had gone too far with his actions this time. Waited quietly in front of the headmaster, who went on to mention that never before, since the academy began, had a student spoken disrespectfully to a teacher. Inside the headmaster's office, a bald man raised his voice at Liam, criticizing him harshly for his disrespectful behavior. Liam fixed his eyes on the other person, his expression icy and unwelcoming. The headmaster, Mrs. who was seated beside him, and the bald man all appeared deeply frightened. Liam explained that his reasons for revealing Teacher Pierce's behavior stemmed from witnessing the teacher treat Asher harshly and unfairly. He acted solely to fulfill his own dark cravings. The headmaster dismissed his remarks with a mocking laugh, questioning whether he had anything more to add. He dismissed the accusation as absurd, insisting that Mr. Pierce was an honorable educator who would never do something like that. Liam questioned inwardly, perplexed that they could make such a statement despite the teacher openly admitting his behavior before the entire class. The headmaster explained that Liam had cleverly deceived him and made him admit the truth. The bald man shifted his gaze toward Mrs., placing the blame on her, and in response she expressed her regret. She turned her attention to Liam, accusing him of being dishonest. She reminded everyone how, only a few months earlier, he had approached her in tears, upset and complaining about being bullied by his classmates. The headmaster cut her off, firmly announcing that their academy did not tolerate physical punishment or bullying in any form. Mrs. nodded in agreement, remarking that it was clear to see. With a wicked grin, she remarked that somber nature made others dislike him, and claimed that he shifted the blame onto everyone else by labeling it as bullying. Liam walked up to Mrs., locking eyes with her. He made it clear through his words and gaze that, ultimately, she had been the person who turned away when he asked for assistance. Mrs.'s expression turned stern as she questioned whether he was once more making threats toward a teacher. The individual insisted that the headmaster remove the student from the school without delay. The headmaster gave his approval without hesitation, faced Liam, and reminded him of his aspiration to one day serve as a national healing mage. She regretfully informed him that his dream had come to an end that day. Liam sat quietly, his mind focused on the dream that Asher had experienced. As the headmaster rose from his seat, he prepared to formally deliver the decision regarding the expulsion. Without warning, someone rapped on the door. The assistant headmaster stepped into the room, offered an apology for disrupting the moment, and explained that he carried an urgent message. Once the headmaster listened to the message, his face transformed with surprise, and he turned to his assistant, clearly stunned, seeking confirmation of what he had just heard. He faced Liam, and with a chilling tone, informed him that he would let him off with only a warning for now. Mrs. eyes widened in disbelief as frustration welled up inside her. She questioned in her mind whether he truly intended not to expel the student. She shouted in outrage, insisting that the situation was absurd and pointing out that the student had nearly taken the life of a blameless teacher. The headmaster lost his temper and demanded her silence, making it clear that Lord himself had given this command. Hearing the name caught everyone off guard. Once the meeting concluded, the headmaster raised his voice at the group, commanding everyone to exit and personally ushered Liam out of the office. Liam was suddenly propelled into the hallway. She started to question what had caused the headmaster to change his mind so abruptly. At that moment, he recalled how Mrs. had spoken sharply to him, insisting that he give up on his dream. He questioned whether she might be another of his intended victims, and resolved to explore memories to uncover the truth. While he walked, he became aware that someone else was nearby. As he spun around, an unexpected sight caught his attention. A girl was quietly standing at the far end of the hallway, leaving him startled. At that instant, a sharp recollection surged through his thoughts, bringing back the echo of a voice taunting him and calling him Mr. Absolute King, as if to say he deserved this fate. He remembered the moment when commanded a woman called Violet to hurt him even more, and Violet had accepted without hesitation. Violet relied on her magical abilities to inflict pain upon him. Demanded that he leave immediately and not be seen again. He was cast into the abyss, burdened by the hope of those around him that he would endure endless torment. He recalled the way Violet had smiled while she observed him as he tumbled down. Liam found himself back in the present, noticing as the girl walked up to him with a determined look, signaling that she wanted to share something important. Liam remembered the warriors from the 100-man unit who had once stood by his side in battle, only to later turn against him. He recalled that these fighters passed down their abilities and recollections, being reborn once every 3 centuries. He instantly understood that the woman in front of him could only be Violet reborn. The girl moved closer to Liam, pausing as she prepared to say something. Liam moved with lightning speed, pressing her against the wall before she could react, which made her let out a startled scream. He expressed his surprise at how effortlessly she had shown up in front of him. This fortunate event spared him the effort he would have spent looking for her. He addressed her as Violet. She pretended not to understand and inquired about Violet's identity. Liam seized her by the neck, remarking on how desperately she fought to stay alive, and questioned whether she truly believed she could escape the consequences of her actions. She quietly admitted her confusion, unable to grasp the meaning of his words. She directed a gust of magical wind in Liam's direction. Using a strong burst of wind, she forced him away from her. Liam believed she was cunning, since she had used the wind god's power against him, a power she had taken from him by spinning an outrageous lie. Violet appeared drained, her energy clearly spent from wielding that ability. Liam remarked that the power was squandered in her possession, since she lacked control over it and was barely tapping into a fraction of its full potential. Liam informed Violet that he believed she lacked the qualities necessary to possess the power. He declared his intention to take back the power she had taken from him. Just as he was about to react, a sudden stabbing pain shot through him, forcing blood to spill from his mouth. He understood that the effort of casting spells had overwhelmed the limits of his delicate body. A sudden weight seemed to press down on him, making his body feel as heavy as solid metal, until he lost consciousness and crumpled to the ground. As he slowly awoke, he realized he was resting on a bed, with Violet, the girl he recognized, and his loyal head butler standing watchfully at his side. The girl's face lit up with relief when she saw that Liam was awake, though he stared back at her with a puzzled expression, uncertain about her presence. As he attempted to rise, she gently held him back, urging him to remain in bed and recover his strength. He quickly knocked her hand aside, confused and trying to understand the situation. The head butler stepped forward and urged Master to reconsider his harsh treatment of the woman who had come to his rescue. Liam echoed the phrase, "saved me," with a puzzled expression, clearly uncertain about its meaning. The head butler recounted how Lady Bridget had come to the young man's aid when he fainted, personally ensuring his safety by carrying him all the way to the palace. Liam realized that his injuries had truly been mended, and he understood that while he was so vulnerable, she had the power to do anything she wished to him. Despite his lingering doubts, he approached her once more, addressing her as Violet and pressing her to reveal her intentions. The girl firmly claimed to be Bridget, his classmate, and appeared confused about why he repeatedly addressed her as Violet. She wondered aloud whether he truly no longer remembered who she was. Liam claimed that she was only pretending to forget and demanded to know how much longer she planned to keep up the act. He brought up the fact that, in a previous life, she had taken the wind god's power from him and used it for herself. This revelation served as undeniable evidence that she truly embodied Violet's reincarnation, making it unthinkable for anyone to feign such an identity after displaying such a unique ability. Bridget appeared utterly confused, quietly repeating phrases about powers and past lives as she tried to make sense of what she had just heard. Liam was convinced that she possessed remarkable boldness to keep pretending. With intense determination, he moved toward her and revealed who he truly was. He explained that over a millennium ago, he had been imprisoned in the abyss by betrayers, and that his name was Liam Hale. Bridget echoed the name in disbelief, her mind racing as she questioned whether he could truly be the famed individual she had heard about. Liam observed her response and thought it appeared sincere, almost as though she truly had no idea who he was, which struck him as odd. He reached out and gently took hold of her chin, uncertainty flickering in his eyes as he questioned whether her lack of recognition was genuine. Just as he prepared to cast a spell on her, the head butler quickly stepped in, summoning a burst of purple energy that halted Liam in his tracks. He requested that the man cease his rough behavior toward the woman. Liam came to understand that his head butler possessed qualities far beyond those of an average servant. Liam questioned about his loyalties, addressing him directly, assured Liam that his allegiance had always belonged to him and that his recent actions were proof of his devotion. He brought up what he had previously mentioned himself, pointing out that was no longer necessary. She questioned whether he was implying that Spotty body was no longer his own, but instead possessed by the soul of Liam Hale. Mauritian, curious about the situation, requested that Liam explain everything to him. A brief pause settled over the scene. Asked once more, wanting to confirm whether the soul residing in the body belonged to Liam Hale instead of. Liam nodded in agreement, deciding he would recount the hardships that both he and had endured. Once he finished sharing his experience, Bridget remarked on the terrible nature of the events, while observed that Liam's unwavering belief in reincarnation was unsurprising. For over 13 centuries, it was common knowledge that the warriors belonging to the 100-man unit, who battled against the Calamity Demon, would be reborn with the memories of their past lives. Bridget revealed that, in a previous existence, her own character had been the source from which the wind god's power was drawn, and now that power resided within her. She lowered herself into a deep bow, expressing her regret. She admitted she couldn't remember what had happened, yet she still expressed regret for her earlier actions. She then volunteered to give back the wind god's power without delay. Liam's lips curled into a gentle smile. She explained that she fully intended to give back the power, yet made it clear that settling the issue would not be so simple. He brought up the fact that he had endured 1,300 years of torment, held captive alongside the Calamity Demon, and suffering through countless forms of torture. The character made a solemn promise that the traitors would experience the same pain. Liam believed that it had been an error to bring him back. He believed they were only pretending to forget in order to escape his vengeance, yet he resolved to offer them no forgiveness. Despite his desire for vengeance, he realized that if their memories were truly gone, enacting his revenge would be hollow. He understood that only by helping them regain their memories could he ensure that his retribution would have real meaning. He explained to Bridget that he intended to access her memories through the use of mind-reading magic. He reached out with his hand, yet there was no response. Mauritian stepped in, clarifying that magical abilities were limited to a feeble form of ice magic. Liam grew increasingly annoyed by his inability to cast even the most basic spell. He soon noticed that, up until now, he had failed to draw any of the wind god's power from Bridget. Liam declared his intention to leave and focus on his magic training, making it clear that he would seek revenge only once he was prepared. Despite his determination, Mauritian and Bridget attempted to persuade him to stay, arguing that he required more time to recover. Volunteered his assistance, confidently mentioning that he had mastered the art of mind-reading magic. Liam scoffed at the suggestion, making it clear he didn't believe a powerful king would ever depend on another person. He stood up to go, informing Mauritian that he would not return until he had perfected this skill, and that there was no need for any meals to be prepared for him in the meantime. Liam started his training and soon noticed that possessed a significant amount of hidden magical power. He understood that, with the right guidance, this new body might even become stronger than the one he had before. He understood that before he could tap into those powers, his delicate body needed to adapt to the strength of intense magic. He attempted to summon a great surge of magic, but the overwhelming force proved too much for his body, causing him to spit out blood. Even though he was in pain, he kept going, convinced that his efforts still fell short, and pressed on with his training long into the night. Mauritian discovered Liam still pushing himself through intense training and pleaded with him to rest, cautioning that if Liam pushed any harder, it could cost him his life. Liam was so deeply absorbed in concentration that he failed to notice speaking to him. Noticed that Liam remained upright through determination alone, and felt a deep admiration for the remarkable focus Liam displayed. Set a plate of food beside him, and described how the meal contained ingredients known to steady magical energies, urging him to try it. Liam pushed himself through another round of challenging exercises, determined to improve with each passing day. The act of calling forth intricate magic circles unfolds. He continued onward, unaware of the truth, until a sudden understanding dawned on him. In under 48 hours, he had already gained complete control over mind reading and ability absorption, even if they were considered only lower-tier forms of magic. He realized inwardly that, just as he had anticipated, the abilities hidden within this body were remarkable. Liam glanced over at the food basket Mauritian had left behind for him, recalling how Mauritian had mentioned that the meal was made with ingredients meant to steady magical energy. Liam's mind unexpectedly filled with thoughts that had no relevance to the moment. From his recollections, he witnessed himself arriving back at the palace looking worn and defeated. He silently admitted his own faults, feeling regret for having been such an inadequate master. Told Mauritian that he would gladly write a letter of recommendation for him whenever he decided to leave the palace. Promised that he would remain by his side forever, vowing to stay close through any circumstance. After thinking back to this memory involving, Liam took a seat and started eating the meal that had waited for him so long it was nearly ruined. Once he had eaten his fill, he chose to rest for a little while. Upon his arrival back at the palace, he observed that the door stood ajar, inviting suspicion. This seemed unusual. He pressed his hand against a certain area on the door and immediately recognized, just as he had anticipated, that the stain was actually blood. Liam stepped inside the grand palace. They discovered the head butler sprawled across the ground, blood streaming over his face and eyes. Liam let out a desperate scream, urgently summoning the head butler and commanding that help be brought right away so he could receive medical attention. He attempted to assist, yet soon recognized with disappointment that his condition prevented him from casting any healing spells. He seized the other's arm, urging him to stay put, and promised he would search for someone who could heal. Once the healer arrived, they managed to halt the bleeding and take care of the broken bones. The healer clarified that, even with treatment, the discomfort, swelling, and bruising would not fully fade for another month. Liam inquired about how his right eye was doing. The healer responded with a heavy heart, explaining that the sight in that eye was unlikely to ever come back. Liam couldn't shake the guilt weighing on him. He blamed himself for the incident, believing that his oversight had allowed the enemy to slip in unnoticed. Mauritian repeatedly expressed regret to his master for being a burden. Liam cut him off, firmly insisting that he stop and more pressingly demanded to know the identity of his attacker. Upon discovering who the attacker was, Liam departed from the palace, his face set in a frosty scowl fueled by anger. In another location, Liam started launching attacks by drawing upon the power of magic circles. Joshua sat in his father's grand palace, savoring an extravagant feast. As he took a sip from his glass, the entire room suddenly trembled with unexpected force. The sudden event startled him so much that he sprang out of his chair, confusion filling his mind as he tried to make sense of the situation. A servant hurried over to him, shouting in alarm about a disaster that had struck the palace gate. Joshua gazed out the window, his eyes widening in disbelief as he noticed the enormous gate reduced to rubble, leaving him stunned and questioning what could have caused such devastation. The servant proposed that an attack had occurred. A sudden thought struck Joshua. Perhaps his father's rivals in politics had hired killers to eliminate their family. He was aware that his father had angered numerous people and created a long list of adversaries. Joshua understood that it would take an extraordinary amount of strength to break through a specially crafted gate, such as this one. Joshua quickly instructed his guards to lock down both the gate and the room without delay. However, before the guards could act, someone spoke up, calmly stating that guards were unnecessary. Liam stepped into the room and announced to Joshua that he was the one Liam had been searching for. Joshua, consumed by rage, commanded his soldiers to end the man's life. Liam suddenly found himself the target as the personal guards hurried in his direction. In a sudden burst of power, he released a surge of ice magic that instantly eliminated every one of them. The guards collapsed onto the floor, overcome and unable to continue fighting. Liam glanced at Joshua with a mocking smile, questioning whether Joshua truly believed that ordinary guards would be enough to stand in his way. Frustration boiled over within Joshua as he muttered a curse under his breath. Fire magic surged forth as fiery spheres were launched toward Liam in a fierce assault. Liam summoned a shield of ice with ease, intercepting the attack before it could reach him. The blast's power sent Joshua, who had been on the offensive, crashing down to the ground. Joshua, feeling utterly defeated, let out a desperate scream as confusion filled his mind about the stranger's identity, and he frantically called on the servants to take action. Liam explained to him that, regrettably, no one around appeared willing to offer any assistance. Joshua could feel fear gripping him tightly. Liam walked up to Joshua, wanting to know if Joshua understood the reason for his presence. With a look of fear, Joshua admitted that he had no idea. Liam fixed his piercing eyes on Joshua, demanding to know if he had the courage to deceive him, while Joshua shook with anxiety and fear. Liam cautioned Joshua to consider his words before responding, then inquired whether Joshua was the son of the individual who held authority over this territory. Liam pointed out that Joshua had been acting according to his own desires, using his father's influence as a shield. That was the reason the head butler recognized him by name. Liam pointed out that the true issue lay with the individual who had secretly worked together with Joshua. Liam pressed a pointed shard of ice against Joshua's eye, explaining that his head butler possessed powerful magic abilities, making it unthinkable that Joshua could have hurt him without help. Liam inquired about who had accompanied Joshua that day, apart from his regular companions. Joshua hesitated and insisted that no one else had been present. Liam's temper flared as he cautioned the other person against forcing him to repeat himself, urging him to consider his words carefully before responding. He demanded once more, his voice tense, wanting to know who was present. Overwhelmed by terror, Joshua fell to the ground and pleaded desperately with Liam for mercy, vowing that he would reveal everything if Liam let him live. Joshua admitted that the companion by his side was none other than King himself. Liam quickly recalled that the headmaster had explained his expulsion had been reversed because Lord had given the command. While Liam pieced together the clues, Joshua pleaded desperately, hoping Liam would pardon him. Liam questioned inwardly whether could truly be considered's enemy. Joshua raised his voice, insisting he dared not reveal anything further, fearing that the king would have him killed if he spoke another word. Liam responded with composure, assuring everyone that he was fine and explaining that he planned to get the information straight from himself. Joshua's eyes widened with astonishment as he noticed Liam getting ready to cast another spell. Confused, Joshua questioned Liam's actions, reminding him that he had already confessed everything. In response, Liam looked at Joshua with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism, silently challenging the idea that simply admitting his mistakes would be enough to earn forgiveness. Especially now, as the head butler's vision was lost forever. Joshua let out a terrified scream. Liam explained that his purpose for being there was not to collect information, but rather to seek revenge. He told him that he was unsure whether causing pain brought him any satisfaction, but he was certain that crossing the line with his head butler had sealed his fate. Joshua pleaded desperately, hoping someone would spare him. Liam walked over to the boy and inquired whether he was familiar with the phrase. Driven by the urge for revenge, he unleashed his magic, forcefully removing Joshua's eye. Joshua's agonized scream echoed, filled with unbearable pain. Later that day at the palace, Liam approached Mauritian, who sat quietly with bandages wrapped around his eyes. Noticing an object in Liam's hands, Mauritian inquired about what he was carrying. Liam revealed a glass jar holding an eyeball, and clarified that it served as a memento from his act of vengeance. His face filled with terror as he pleaded for Liam to bury it in the garden. Liam, with a mischievous grin, teased by suggesting they could showcase it on a display shelf instead. Quickly cut him off, firmly stating that he had heard enough. Mauritian expressed his surprise, admitting that he had never expected Liam to come back with such an achievement. In response, Liam insisted that winning this trophy by itself was not sufficient for him. This realization revealed that some individuals still warranted retribution. Liam inquired about the identity of the second assailant, prompting Mauritian to reveal that someone had struck him from behind. Liam explained that he had compelled Joshua to reveal his partner's identity, who turned out to be Prince. Liam wondered aloud whether the name Prince held any significance for Mauritian. Mauritian paused without speaking, and Liam took this as a sign that Mauritian was already familiar with the name. Mauritian explained to Liam that he had no desire to seek revenge against that individual. Liam made it clear that he had no desire to fulfill any wishes, prompting Mauritian to point out that Liam had no obligation to pursue vengeance on his account from the beginning. He was reminded that his title as master belonged to the past. Liam confirmed his lack of involvement, yet reminded everyone that had once viewed as an ally. Liam went on to share that he owed a great debt because had given him a body. Because of this, he resolved to fulfill every wish that might have had. He went on to say that was probably the one responsible for his death. Liam could clearly remember Joshua writhing in agony after his eye was lost. Liam turned his back on Joshua's palace, leaving the scene behind him. He instructed the servants to help the woman who had collapsed and to make sure she received proper attention. He shifted his attention toward Joshua, who stood frozen in fear. The person pleaded desperately, hoping for compassion. Liam explained to him that, by doing this, he had honored his head butler's memory and settled the outstanding debt. He mentioned, however, that settling the score was still unfinished. Liam seized Joshua, leveling an accusation that Joshua had drugged and taken over his life. Joshua tried to justify his actions by explaining that he acted solely because he had been instructed to do so. Liam wondered aloud whether the instructions had come from Prince. Joshua affirmed this, noting that had warned him with death should he choose to disclose the secret. Joshua collapsed onto the ground, his body twisting in pain as he pleaded desperately to be forgiven. Returning to the present moment, Liam insisted to Mauritian that questioning was necessary for his well-being. However, Mauritian intervened, pleading with Liam to hold off. He reacted with disbelief, questioning whether Master had been poisoned and murdered. This would mean that Master had truly passed away. Clung to a fragile sense of optimism, questioning whether the situation was merely a brief exchange between Master Liam's and his personalities. He wondered aloud if that was exactly what was happening. Liam revealed the terrifying reality, had been made to use drugs against his will by cruel people. After enduring intense pain, lost his life. This tragic event allowed Liam's soul to inhabit his body. He explained that a single body was only capable of holding 2 souls at most. As a result, his essence and character had vanished from this body. Fell to the ground, overwhelmed by disbelief and unable to accept what had happened. Tears welled up in her eyes as memories of Master's warmth and kindness flooded her mind. He recalled that had always been compassionate, never harboring hatred toward anyone regardless of the circumstances, and mourned the cruel fate that had led to suffering and death. Seething with both anger and sorrow, Mauritian insisted that such an act was beyond forgiveness, and turned to Master Liam to ask whether he would seek vengeance on behalf of Master. Liam's eyes burned with resolve as he tightened his fist, making it clear through his expression that following through had always been his plan.